But remember, each of those organs holds hands with muscles, so an irritated organ will shut the blood supply down to the muscles it shares a relationship with, because when it comes to survival, your organs are more important than your muscles. Today I thought I'd share a few concepts that I use whenever I train, and they're general concepts so that you learn how to improvise and adapt so that your workout A, gives you what you want out of it, and B, so that you know when your body's talking to you and needs some fine-tuning, or whether maybe you should take the day off and do some inner work or flexibility work or joint mobilization work instead of training. Now, as you age, your body doesn't heal as fast, you don't have as much testosterone, you often can't work out as much. I'll be 60 in a couple of months, so I've been at this quite a long time. I started lifting weights when I was 12, so I've got a lot of years of experience. And so I'm just going to show you some of the things that I do in my normal process. Now, I teach these to all CHEK professionals as well, but they're really things that I learned, A, from being a therapist, B, understanding anatomy and physiology and psychology and the related sciences, and C, wanting not to destroy myself trying to stay healthy. So today I'm going to do some squatting. I'll probably do a little bit of lunging. I typically do 2 big exercises and a core exercise as a standard format, just because I don't have a lot of time and I have to capitalize on the time. So today I'm going to do some squatting. So the first thing you want to do, as an example, is do the movement that you're going to do with weights, without any weights, and just see how does it feel. Okay. Now, I've got a little discomfort in my right hip. We had a little celebration here and I ate a little bit of gluten-free something, but my body hates anything made out of grain, so there's always that sacrifice. When you have foods that your body doesn't digest effectively, can get into your bloodstream, and then the food antigens, the undigested particles, get caught where the capillarization gets so small that even one platelet of the red blood can only get through. And so you're talking about the weaving of capillaries to finer and finer, to the point that only one blood platelet can make it through, but a food antigen can be 5 or more times the size of one red blood cell. So when those antigens get caught, they usually get caught around joints, and you're most likely to have pain around the joints you use the most, because at night the immune system will send out antibodies or even natural killer cells to try to cleave those and get them out of your tissues, which creates inflammation and discomfort. So my point is, as I squat down, I feel that, and I know exactly what that is, because if I eat any grains whatsoever, even 2 mouthfuls, it seems to bother that right hip. So I know, okay, I'm going to need to loosen that hip up in order to get down into my squat without discomfort or without unconsciously shifting my weight to the other side, which produces a torsion and increases the risk of injury. And also, you can tell if you have any of this kind of chronic inflammation in your body, because it will cause an accumulation of fluid right around the belly button. So you can see there's a little puffiness right there. Normally I'm super ripped and lean, but that's all it took, was just like that much of a lemon bar, so less than half, and you can see there's an accumulation. You get that puffiness right around the belly right there. That's an indication that cortisol levels are up, so that means the body's fighting off some kind of an inflammatory issue, and that gives you a general idea of the global response. So think of metabolic syndrome, where people are all swollen and their bellies are sticking out. That's an extreme example of what I'm showing you, a very minor example of, but if you're going to lift heavy or do a hard workout, even a minor indication of global inflammation means that you're probably at risk of injury if you're not careful, because with higher inflammation you have more acidity, and if you have enough acidity in your body, then it can affect your proprioception and your sense of where you're at, and it can make joints painful, and pain causes inhibition, which causes the brain to have to change the way you recruit the muscles, and so then you start getting into substitution patterns. And if you get into substitution patterns, what happens is if you can't turn on the stabilizer muscles, which are the deepest muscles, which are reflexing directly to your organs, as are all the muscles, but those stabilizer muscles react to any faulty loading or stress by tightening, by lengthening and weakening typically. So your inner unit muscles will shut down to make more room for swollen viscera. So without making it too complicated, what that means is you can't activate your core properly, and then your joints are left unstable because the spinal axis is the basis from which your extremities move. And in a squat, you're holding your spine real still, but you're doing a lot of action with your legs. So if you can't hold your spine real still because your inner unit's shut off, then even though it looks like you're squatting normally in the mirror, if you could see inside your body, there'll be a torsion pattern. And when you're at the bottom of a squat or a deadlift, where you have the most flexion, if there's a torsion pattern, you can get forward shear and twist, which is very potentially damaging to discs, and depending on how much degeneration you have, you could pinch a nerve. So there's many things that can happen, none of which you want. Next, I just say, okay, well, let me see what I feel like with a bar, and this gives me a little weight to help me sink into the pattern. So I like to use a low bar position because I have an old neck injury that doesn't like it if I use a high bar position. High bar position is up here. Low bar position puts the bar right on the spine of the scapula. So I just inhale, set my core, drop down. And now I'm still feeling that. So one of the things I can do is just adjust my stance a little bit, and you'll find what I call the groove. The groove is where you can sit in the woods and have a poop without discomfort. If your feet are too wide or too narrow, it'll bind you. So if I go too wide, I get stuck. If I go too narrow, then I get stuck. I can't get down between my legs, it'll push me forward. So there's that sweet spot there, that groove, and it's right there for me, okay? So I can feel I need a little preparation work, and that's what I'm going to show you here. So knowing that it's a tight right hip and hip flexor, I'm going to start by just doing a lunge stretch and just opening that up. Now the lat goes all the way down the side and crosses the pelvis. So I like to induce side flexion and rotation to get the lat, but also the psoas is the primary hip flexor, and the psoas is a hip flexor internal rotator. So what happens is as I lean into my stretch, I tuck my tail to pre-stretch the rectus femoris, and then I lean sideways to get the lat, but as I'm leaning sideways, I'm side bending my lumbar spine away, which has the increasing effect on the stretch. Then I inhale, and I try to activate my hip flexors like I'm trying to throw a kick, but the ground's restricting it. That fires the muscle, generates heat, and it works the nervous system. So as soon as I relax, the nervous system gives me about a quarter of a second where it completely goes silent, which lets me stretch the muscle. And this kind of stretching also resets the nervous system, because whenever there's pain, the nervous system gets facilitated, which means excited, and that can irritate muscles. So not only am I stretching the muscle, I'm doing a reset, almost like a reboot on the computer, to the nerves that fire the hip flexors, which is largely L3 and L4. L2, 3, and L4 is the quads. And I can actually feel that spot of discomfort in there. Inhale, activate the muscles for 5 seconds. Relax, tuck the tail, sink in, side bend, turn. Hold for a good solid 5 seconds without activation. Inhale, try to pull your leg forward against the mat like you're throwing a kick. Exhale, immediately move into the stretch without being jerky, side bend, rotate. Okay, so that's 3 on that one. And that opens that up, so I'll just check the other one. Remember, if it's not tight, don't stretch it. Think of your body like a bicycle wheel. If it's loose and crooked, and you loosen all the spokes, it's looser and crooked. If it's tight and crooked and you tighten all the spokes, it's tight and crooked. So if it's tight, release it, but if you have normal range of motion, then don't stretch it or you just maintain an imbalance. Now you're just loose and crooked. So I drop in there and I can feel muscle tightness. There's no discomfort, but I definitely feel that my body would like a little release in there. Okay. And just stretch enough to where you feel like you're balancing it out. Next, and I'm not going to go through this entire thing. I do have a video here on my YouTube channel showing you how to release the front panel. But one of the most important things to do is release the abdominal muscles, because if they're tight, they stop you from getting into good positions for overhead lifts, for putting the bar on your back, etc. So we begin on the right always with this technique. We move up and then we come down the left, because the sigmoid colon is on the left, so remember your poop leaves on the left. So the ascending colon is here. We want to put pressure in a way that moves the feces along the colon's natural path, because a lot of people have a weakness in their colon and can have what are called diverticuli, which are like bulges in the colon. I don't know if you've ever seen a bulge in a radiator hose, or how a tire can get a hole in the sidewall and rubber can bulge out of it. So it looks like a little balloon coming out of the colon. And if you put too much pressure on the colon and you're going against the flow, you might actually burst diverticuli, which could kill somebody. So in a nutshell, we always want to go with the flow of fecal material. And for constipated people, it often results in them having to have a bowel movement, because it's actually facilitating moving stuck fecal material through the system. So I start with the roller right on my inguinal ligament. Anterior superior iliac spine, pubic symphysis, inguinal ligament. Your abdominal wall attaches down there. It's an area that very few people ever do anything to maintain, and it can get some really nasty trigger points that fire right into the testicles and the back. So I'm just going to lay on that roller and just work my way through, and I've got the roller set so it goes along the midline. If the roller goes across the other side, you're doing exactly what I just said not to do, which is going against the flow. And I'm just feeling for soreness in the muscles, and I can feel it. Now, one of the things is most people from bad diet and lifestyle practices have chronic inflammation in their organs. And so you want to be able to differentiate, is this discomfort I'm feeling in my organs or in my muscles? So here's a technique for you. So let's say I feel a little discomfort right there like I do. If I tighten my muscles and the discomfort is less, it means that the problem that I'm feeling is in the organs, because the tightening of the abdominal wall causes tension, which lifts the pressure of the roller off the organ. If I tighten the muscle and I feel it more, it indicates the discomfort is largely in the muscle. Now, if you feel that it's in your organs, it's a real indicator to pay attention to what you're putting into your body, because it's causing general inflammation in your organs, which leads to a lot of health challenges over time. If it's in the muscles, then work it out with the roller and with abdominal stretching. And so then I just keep slowly working up. And now, when you get up to the diaphragm, you want to position the roller slightly differently, because that roller has to get between where the xiphoid process is, right here, And I've got to get it up under that rib cage. Your liver's over here, so a lot of people are very sore because their liver's inflamed. And you can see that in bodybuilders, their guts stick out because their livers are often so inflamed from steroid use. And so now I get in here and I definitely feel some discomfort because having eaten gluten-free stuff, it irritates the whole digestive tract. But remember, each of those organs holds hands with muscles, so an irritated organ will shut the blood supply down to the muscles it shares a relationship with, because when it comes to survival, your organs are more important than your muscles. And so I inhale, and as I exhale, I just let that roller sink down under my rib cage. And then I'll just work with it, and it's quite sore in there. It's amazing what just 4 bites of a gluten treat can do to you. Now, I'm a healthy guy and very sensitive to my body. A lot of people probably wouldn't even notice things like this. But the more fine-tuned you are, the more sensitive you are to imbalances. So I'm working in there. Now I'm just really sinking in there. And so then I'll come to the other side. And now I go in the opposite direction. I start from the top and work my way down. Okay. Now, interestingly and expectingly, I don't have near the discomfort on the left side. Why? Because that's my stomach. And my liver is more irritated than my stomach. Just a little tip for you, your liver links to your right shoulder and neck. Your stomach to your left shoulder and neck. So chronic liver problems are usually associated with rotator cuff and shoulder injuries on the right, stomach problems to the left shoulder and rotator cuff. But I don't have that discomfort at all. It just feels like muscle tightness. And so I feel like I'm already as deep on that roller as I was, so now I'll just work my way down. And now I'm pushing that fecal material that I pushed up down toward the sigmoid colon, but fortunately for me, I already had a nice movement this morning, so it doesn't create any pressure or discomfort. And being constipated and lifting heavy weights is a bad combination. Most people aren't aware of this because they haven't studied anatomy very thoroughly, even people that should know. But you have stretch receptors in your sigmoid colon. That's why you can feel when you really have to go poop, because you have 2 anal sphincters, an internal and an external. The external is controlled by striated skeletal muscle, which means it's consciously regulated, but the internal is visceral. So what happens is when you have fecal material, that internal sphincter starts to get open because the impaction of the fecal material, what you call a turd, is stretching the lumen of the large intestine, and that reflexively shuts the abdominal wall off to cause a relaxation and a voiding effect, and it also relaxes the pelvic floor, because if your pelvic floor and your abdominals don't relax, then the poop won't fall out of you. Now, we bear down when we have to push things out, but you'll also see the look on a person's face doing that. They have to almost concentrate because you got to do 2 things that are kind of contradictory. You got to push and relax at the same time. So it kind of becomes a juggling act. I have little kids, you can see them really concentrating when they're a little constipated, usually because they didn't drink enough water. But the point I'm making is if you have impaction from constipation, it's telling your pelvic floor and your abdominal wall to shut off while you're lifting heavy weights. And because the visceral system has more control over the whole musculoskeletal system than the motor system itself, you can't override that. And I've seen athletes get bad injuries and couldn't heal until I actually was brought in on the cases and identified that they had chronic constipation and did the work necessary to get their colon working properly, and then their pain goes away and they think it's a miracle, but it's not a miracle. It's called just understanding how anatomy works. So I'm working this down now and just feeling, and there's a nice little spot right there. I tighten and it makes the muscle hurt worse, so I know It's in my abdominal wall, and I just did some heavy stone work yesterday, so you get into these weird angles where you can get real strain going through your body, and so you can get sore muscles in weird places from that kind of training, which I love. And so now I'm right down to my lower abdominal region here, and then I want to make sure I turn that roller at an angle to get that inguinal ligament on this side where the abdominals attach. And there can often be, as I said before, painful trigger points there that can fire right into your sex organs and into your low back. And oftentimes people have chronic back pain that won't go away without realizing it's actually coming from the abdominal wall, firing through the nervous system into their low back. And so now that's released, then I can quickly take the big roller and want to release the chest as well so the shoulders can get into position properly for overhead lifts and holding the bar. And I move through that and I put a little pressure and release my neck with it. And your body will guide you if you just listen to it. It's better to do things like this in quiet than with a bunch of noise around, or you'll get distracted from what your body's trying to tell you. And so I want to mobilize these upper ribs too. And you can get your arm over the roller and get underneath into where the pecs attach up there in the front of the shoulder. And it feels good to get that loosened up. And then we want to get the thighs, since they're going to get a nice workout. And those don't feel bad at all. Another tip for you is your stomach meridian runs right down the rectus femoris. So often people will have knots and sore spots in their quadriceps that are hard to get rid of. Even massage therapists have a hard time getting rid of them, but they don't realize it's a reflex from the stomach meridian. So if people have digestive challenges of any kind or a parasite infection, they'll often have quadriceps that get knots in them and are very sore because the stomach's dissipating the excess energy to try to protect the stomach by dumping it down into the quadriceps. And that's why it's always so important to know how the muscles relate to the organs, which I teach very thoroughly in HLC 2 and then much more deeply in Holistic Lifestyle Coach Level 3. And then I just hit the gluteus medius and the tensor fasciae lata, which the tensor fasciae lata is a hip flexor. Gluteus medius abducts the leg. And I roll and check the other side. And that feels fine. Okay, then I'm going to flip over and make sure all the joints are moving. And just give that a little roll, and everything down there feels pretty good, even though I did some heavy lifting yesterday. And so I'm just looking to let the ribs adjust and to let the spine adjust as it wants to, and I'm getting some nice corrections in there, just mobilizing those joints. Then I get up and get that lower cervical spine and just look. Sometimes I like to take my head this way and adjust the verb or just gaps, the facet joints. You don't want to be forceful or brutal. Then I reach up, open my rib cage, and find anywhere that I can release something. Breathe into it. Release with it. And then I grab the opposite arm to put tension on the lat. I roll over, and I can pull the shoulder down like that and contract the lat and then release it and let me sink deeper into the stretch. You'll also find trigger points in your lats if you have them, and they can be quite uncomfortable as well, so you want to get them out of there. And so I just want to make sure that my spine is flexible, my ribs are flexible, my neck's in a nice position, my abdominal wall's free. And you notice I started by doing the movement just with body weight, and now I can go down in there with great ease. There isn't any discomfort like there was before. You know, if you have an area that's irritated, it's already excited. So as soon as you start loading that area, it excites it even more. And that can lead to spasm or cramping in muscles and even muscle tearing if you're not careful. But the whole electrical system is trying to compensate. If you lift weights when you're in a state of compensation, it magnifies the compensation, and next thing you know, you have programmed substitution patterns into your nervous system, and then people don't realize they're lifting with bad technique because they can't tell. That's why a skilled coach is so important. Now I'm ready to lift, and so in a minute here, once I've gotten warmed up a little, I'll come back and I'll just show you another technique for settling into a lift on days when you still have a kind of a rusty hinge type effect, which by the time you get to my age, I've had a whole life of intense competitive athletics, motocross racing, kickboxing, rodeo riding, parachuting. You know, I've got broken bones all through me, so I'm kind of like an old battle wreck. So in order to keep fit and keep healthy, I have to be quite savvy about listening to my body. But interestingly, if I listen to it and give it what it needs, I can go out there and lift stones, or even be in here with guys that are, you know, have a lot more muscle than me and look like Herculean dudes, but they can't figure out how I can lift stones. They can't even get off the ground and stack them chest high and do wild stuff. And they look at that and go, how in the hell does he do that? It's because I know how to do it for longevity, and even an old beat up guy like me knows how to tune the system up and get the race car ready for the event. And the other thing is, remember, if you don't feel like you can do at least 1 to 3% better than the last time you were in the gym, you don't belong in the gym. You should be doing restoration work. Too much youthful aggressiveness is a bad idea. It just leads to a lot of pain, dysfunction, injury, and you may get away with it for a while and be what I call a one-hit wonder, but then spend 2 or 3 years trying to figure out how to get back to where you were, when really just a little bit of daily maintenance and some common sense and a little bit of understanding goes a long ways. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, I've got a little bit of load on the bar. I'm just going to step in to begin my workout. I'm going to show you how to play with the weight and just grease the hinges a little bit to get yourself into it. Okay, so we're going to get under the bar. Inhale through the belly, set the core, pick it up, step back. You don't need to go any further than just enough to clear the rack. Okay, find your stance, get that sweet spot. And then just work into it, and don't feel like you got to push all the way to the bottom. You can just begin with what feels good and start warming and stretching the muscles. I like to go up onto my toes to fire off my postural and balance systems, because it gets the system excited and ready for more work. So as I drop in, I'm just opening those joints and feeling, do I need to adjust my stance at all until I get that perfect stance? And I can just do a little play and slowly and steadily work my way down. Okay. Okay, so there's a nice little warm-up set. And as I go up in weight, then I feel my way into it. never good to push into pain, because immediately the system will modulate and you'll move away from the pain, inducing torsion and setting yourself up for any number of injuries that you don't want, unless you're a fool with a lot of money. So those are just a few of the basic tips that I wanted to share, because most people not only don't do these things, but they're in a hurry quite often when they go to the gym. And these are the things you can't afford to skip. I tell the athletes I work with, you'd be better to skip your workout and do these warm-up procedures, because they're what keep you in the game for the long run. But if you think you're gonna save 15 minutes and just bang a workout out, and you end up developing faulty movement patterns that ultimately lead to an injury, it could take you years to resolve all that. And you may not if you don't have a skilled enough therapist, for unfortunately there's very few that have the knowledge necessary. That I teach CHEK trained professionals. It takes years of training and years of study to be a level 4, or which is now IMS 5 in the CHEK system. But that's why I share these tips for you. That's my social service offering. Because right now, with what's going on in the world, we need all hands on deck. We need awake people, healthy people that can share love, vitality, truth, and inspire freedom. So hopefully you get what I'm talking about here. So that's my tips for you today. Practice those things, see how you feel. I'll be willing to bet you, as sure as I'm bald, that you're gonna feel better, train better, look better. And if that works for you, maybe you'll come join us at the CHEK Institute, join the CHEK tribe, and become a master. See you next time.